had not meant to listen. That is what I would tell myself afterward, when I needed to believe I was the kind of woman who walked past doorways with her eyes forward. I would say it in my head, in the small, dark hours, like a prayer. I had not meant to listen. I had only been carrying a tray. The truth was simpler and worse. I had heard my name in the next room and stopped. The door to the king's antechamber stood open a hand's breadth, the way it always did at that hour, when his beater brought him his second cup of wine and his first stack of complaints. I had walked these corridors for 9 months as a healer's apprentice, and in those 9 months I had learned the shape of every door in the fortress, which ones whispered when they swung, which ones complained, which ones the king left ajar because he liked the sound of footfalls in the corridor better than silence. This door was always ajar. I was 22 years old, the daughter of a midwife from a village 3 valleys over, and I had no business being inside the iron fortress at all. The healer had brought me because I had a steady hand and an unsentimental face, and because 3 of her senior apprentices had refused the posting on the grounds that the Alpha King was reputed to kill men who looked at him sideways. I did not look at him sideways. I did not look at him at all, if I could help it. That was the arrangement I had made with myself on the first day, and it had worked, more or less, until that evening with the tray. His voice came through the gap. "You are going to ask me again," he said, "and I am going to tell you again, and we are going to do this until one of us dies of it." His beater laughed. His beater was the only man in the fortress who laughed at the king, which was why he had been the beater for 11 years and would die in that office. "I am asking because the council is asking. The council is asking because the council exists to ask. Humour them. Humour me." A pause. The sound of a cup being set down. He set things down with a particular care, the king, as though every object might be made of something more fragile than it appeared. I had noticed this in the great hall, in the library, at the long table where he took his meals when he was not pretending he did not need to eat. I had noticed it, the way one notices a thing one cannot quite explain. "I have told you what I want. You have told me what you do not want." His beater sounded fond, which was strange to hear about a king. "You do not want the Lady Sigrun. You do not want the Voskar girl. You do not want the cousin of the Eastern Alpha who is, I will remind you, both beautiful and politically useful. She talks during meals. They all talk during meals. That is what meals are for. Not at the rate she does." I should have walked away then. I had a tray. I had a destination. There were tinctures growing cold on a windowsill in the healer's quarters, and a child in the village with a fever I had promised to see before dark. None of that was inside the antechamber. None of that required me to stand motionless in a cold stone corridor with my breath gone shallow in my throat. The king spoke again. "Let me tell you what I want then, since you are going to make me." I am bracing myself. "She would be quiet," the king said. I felt the word land somewhere under my ribs and stay there. Not silent, quiet. There is a difference. The kind of quiet that means she is paying attention. The kind of quiet that means when she does speak, you stop what you are doing to hear it. His beater did not interrupt. I imagine he knew better. I imagine he had been waiting 11 years for this and had no intention of breaking it open with the wrong word. "She would not be afraid of me," the king went on. "Not in the way they all are. Wary, perhaps. Watchful. She would have learned somewhere in her life to keep her face still when she needed to. But not afraid. I would have to be able to look at her and know that whatever she gave me, she chose to give. I have spent too long being given things by people who could not refuse me. I will not take another." I felt my hand tighten on the edge of the tray. She would be clever. Not the kind of clever that performs at dinner, The kind of clever that notices what is in the room and does not feel the need to announce it. She would catch me in something, eventually. She would not say so. She would let me know she had caught me. With her eyes. With a pause. Somewhere in my chest, a slow heat was beginning that I did not have a name for. She would have hands that knew work. I have no patience left for hands that have not. She would smell like, I cannot describe it, hearth and pine, and the salt at the back of a draught. Like a window that has just been opened. I would know it the moment I walked into a room. I had been making a tincture that morning of pine pitch and rosemary salt. It was on my hands. It was in my hair. I had complained about it at breakfast. She would be kind, he said, but she would not be soft. There is a difference there too. The softness in this fortress is a kind of weakness wearing perfume. She would be kind the way a blade is kind, by being exactly what it is, in your hand, when you need it. His beater said, quietly, "You have given this some thought." "I have given this," the king said, "every thought." There was a long pause, into which I should have moved my feet. Halvar, do not. Halvar, are you describing a woman, or are you describing the woman? He did not answer. His beater let out a breath I felt in my own chest. How long? I do not know what you are asking. How long, my king? A pause. And then the king of the Iron Territories said, in a voice I had never heard him use before, in a voice no one in this fortress had heard him use before. Since the moon ceremony. Since the apprentice with the steady hands set the salve on the boy from the kitchens and did not look up at me when I entered the room. Since she did not look up. I am still waiting for her to look up. I set the tray down on the floor of the corridor as silently as I had ever done anything in my life. I walked. I did not run. Running would have made a sound. I walked the length of the long corridor with my hands fisted in the front of my skirt and my breath ragged in my throat and the salt pine smell of myself rising around me like a confession. And I did not look back. And I did not look up. And I did not stop until I was in the herb garden behind the kitchens, with both hands flat against the cold stone of the well and my forehead pressed to my own knuckles. He had been describing me. He had been describing me, and he had not known I was there, and he had not known I would know. And now I knew, and I did not know what to do with knowing. He had been waiting for me to look up. Stay with me. I know what this sounds like. I am the one who lived it, and it still sounds like a story someone is telling about a different woman. But please, stay. The part that follows is the part I have never told anyone, and if I am ever going to tell it, I would like to tell it to you. If you have made it this far and you want the rest, follow along. There is more, and the more is what matters. The healer found me at the well an hour later. She did not ask what had happened. She set a hand on the back of my neck the way she had done when I was a child with a fever, and she said, "Whatever it is, it will keep until you have eaten." And then she went back inside. It did not keep. It did not keep for the 3 days that followed, in which I did not enter the corridor near the antechamber once. It did not keep for the 4th day, on which Lady Sigrun arrived at the fortress with her father and 6 attendants, and made it known within an hour of her arrival that she intended to be the Luna by the next full moon. It did not keep on the 5th day, when I was summoned to the Great Hall. I had never been in the Great Hall before. Apprentices did not enter the Great Hall. Apprentices entered the kitchens, the herb garden, the infirmary, the long stone corridor that ran along the western wall, and the king's antechamber, only when carrying a tray for someone of higher rank. The Great Hall was for nobles, for councils, for kings. I went anyway. The summons was a small, folded square of parchment, pressed into my hand by a page who would not meet my eyes. The handwriting on the outside read only, "The healer's apprentice, by name of Wren, to attend His Majesty in the Great Hall at the 8th bell." It was not signed. I knew the hand anyway. I had seen it on 3 labels in the King's library, written into the margins of medical texts in a script too careful to be anyone but his. I wore the same grey linen I wore every day. I considered very briefly asking the healer if she had a second dress I might borrow. And then I considered what that would mean. Arriving in the Great Hall in finery I did not own, on the day after Lady Sigrun's arrival, as if I were competing for something I had not yet been told I was being offered. And I put on my apron and tied my hair back with the same length of cord I always used. If he wanted me, he could have me as I was. If he did not, the grey linen would survive the embarrassment. The Great Hall was full. I had not expected that. I had imagined a private audience, the king at his desk, the beta in attendance, a question about a poultice or a herb. I had not imagined the long, firelit hall and the rows of nobles in their winter colours, and Lady Sigrun standing at the king's right hand in a gown the colour of cut garnet, her father behind her, the council ranged along the far wall, the wolf throne on its dais, with the king seated in it, watching the door, watching me. The hall went quiet. I had walked into rooms before that went quiet when I entered, but always because something had been said before I arrived. This was a quiet of a different shape. This was the quiet of a room holding its breath because it had been told to. Lady Sigrun moved first. She turned to the king with a small, indulgent smile, the kind of smile a woman gives a man when she is about to forgive him for being unreasonable. And she said, loudly enough for the council to hear, "Surely, my king, you did not mean for the herb girl to attend the betrothal council." He did not look at her. He looked at me. "I sent for her," he said. "To what purpose?" "My own." The room shifted. I felt the shift, the way one feels weather change. A pressure in the chest, a small lift in the hair at the back of the neck. Behind Lady Sigrun, her father's mouth tightened. To the king's left, the beater lowered his eyes, and, I would swear on the well in the herb garden, smiled. The king stood. He came down from the dais. He came down from the dais, and he crossed the length of the hall. And every step echoed on the stone. And I did not look up. I did not look up. I had been told to look up by a man who did not know I had heard him, and I would not give him the looking up cheaply. He stopped 3 paces from me. He did not close the distance. He stood 3 paces from me, with his hands at his sides and his shoulders carefully still. And he said, in the voice that carried through the hall without rising, "Lady Sigrun has come from the Voskar territories to discuss a marriage alliance." I waited. "I have declined." A murmur rose along the far wall and was put down by someone's hand on someone's arm. "I have declined," he said again, "for reasons I am not at liberty to discuss with the council at this time. I wish those reasons to be present in the room when I declined, so that the council understands my decision is not one I have made lightly, and so that the reasons themselves understand they have been heard." The reasons. He had not said me. He had said reasons. He had given me an exit. He had stood in front of his entire court and given me the chance to be a logistical matter, a footnote, a thing he could untangle with words if I needed him to. I lifted my eyes. I lifted my eyes, and I looked at him for the first time since the moon ceremony. His face did the thing it had been trying not to do. I do not know what he saw in mine. I do not know what mine did. I know that the beater, 3 steps behind him, turned slightly toward the wall, as if to give us the smallest possible privacy that could be granted in a room of 70 people. I know that Lady Sigrun's small, indulgent smile fell in a way I will remember the rest of my life. I know that the king's hand moved. Once, a small, abortive gesture, an unfinished reaching, and then stilled. He said, "Wren." It was the first time he had said my name aloud. I said, "My king, I will not keep you." "I know. I will not." He stopped. He stopped, and he looked for a word, and the word would not come. His beater did not help him. He found his way alone. "I will not pretend the reasons were anything but you. If you would prefer I pretend, I will. The choice is yours." I felt the heat in my chest crack open into something warmer, larger, harder to hold. I felt Lady Sigrun's eyes on the side of my face. I felt the council's breath in the rafters. I felt the wolf throne behind him, empty, waiting for an answer it had no right to demand. I said, "Do not pretend." He let out a breath I had not seen him hold. He turned then to the council. He turned with his shoulders set in a way I had not seen them set, and he said, "This audience is concluded. Lady Sigrun and her father will be granted the hospitality of the fortress for as long as they require to make travel arrangements. The healer's apprentice will remain." The council understood. The council had been understanding for some time, I suspected. The council filed out with the disciplined silence of people who had just witnessed something they would be discussing in private rooms for the next 3 weeks. Lady Sigrun did not file out. She crossed to me. She stopped 2 paces from me, and she looked at me with the precise, polished hatred of a woman who had been raised to expect a throne and had just been told no in front of 70 witnesses. And she said, very softly, in a voice that did not carry past my ear, "He will tire of you, herb girl. They always do." I said, "Perhaps." I said it because it was true. I did not yet know that it was not. She smiled the small smile again and left. The hall emptied. The fire burned. The baiter found a reason to be elsewhere. The king and I were alone. In a room that had held 70 people 60 seconds earlier, and neither of us moved. He said, "I would like to show you something." He showed me the journal. It was in his private study, on the desk, in the drawer that had no lock, because he did not believe in locking things from people who would not look. He set it open in front of me and stepped back, and he stood at the window with his hands behind his back. And he did not watch me read it. The journal began 9 months ago. The first entry was 3 lines long. "A new apprentice arrived with the healer today. She set a salve on a kitchen boy's hand without flinching at the burn. She did not look up when I entered the room. I do not know her name. I would like to." The second entry was a week later. "Her name is Wren. The healer says she is 22. I asked the healer. I should not have asked the healer." The entries went on. They were not love letters. They were not even, most of them, about me. They were the careful, undecorated observations of a man who had been trying to understand something happening to him by writing it down. The cup she set on the windowsill is still there. She corrected the kitchen master about the dosage of willow bark and was right. Her hands were stained green for 4 days from the moss tincture, and I caught myself wondering when they would be clean and what colour they would be. And then I closed this book and walked into the training yard for 2 hours. There was an entry from the night of the moon ceremony. She did not look up. I waited the whole ceremony for her to look up. She did not. I do not know what I would have done if she had. There was an entry from the night Lady Sigrun's letter arrived, requesting a betrothal audience. The Voska girl is coming. I will see her, because I must, and I will say no, because I am not capable of saying yes to anyone who is not the apprentice with the steady hands. I have known this for 6 months. I have not told her. I am not going to tell her. I am only going to keep declining. There was an entry from 3 days ago, dated the morning after I had stood outside his antechamber with a tray. She heard. I do not know how I know. I know. The tray was outside the door when I left. She had set it down. She had not knocked. She had not entered. She had heard. I have spent 3 days waiting to see if she will come to me, or if she will leave the fortress, or if she will say nothing and pretend it did not happen. I do not know which I am hoping for. That is not true. I know. I closed the journal. I stood at his desk with my hand flat on the cover for a long time. He did not turn from the window. The fire shifted in the grate. Somewhere in the lower fortress, a hound bayed and was answered. I said, "You have been writing about me for 9 months. Yes. You did not give me this to flatter me. No. Why did you give me this?" He turned then. He did not cross to me. He stayed at the window with his hands behind his back, and he said, "Because I am asking you to choose, and I would not have you choose without knowing what you would be choosing. I have been mine, about you, for a long time. You have been yours. If you stay knowing that. If you go knowing that. Either way, you would know." I said, "What do you want me to choose?" "I cannot answer that." "You can." "I will not. The whole point is that I will not." I looked at the journal. I looked at the careful, undemanding handwriting that had kept itself to a desk in a study for 9 months, because the man who wrote it had decided that wanting was not the same as taking, and would never be permitted to become the same. I looked at the door behind me, which was open a hand's breadth, in the way the doors in this fortress were always open a hand's breadth for me. And I understood for the first time that the doors had been open on purpose. I said, "I am going back to the infirmary now." He did not move. "I will come and find you tomorrow," I said. "After I have slept. After I have decided which woman I am going to be. The one who walks back into this study, or the one who does not. Either way, you will know by the 8th bell. Ren, my king. Thank you for reading it." I did not sleep. I did not sleep, and I did not decide. And at the 4th bell, I gave up on both and went to the herb garden. And that was where Lady Sigrun's hand found me. She did not come herself. She had sent a girl from the kitchens with a cup of warm, spiced wine, and a message that the king had asked it be brought to me. The girl was crying as she handed it over, and would not say why, and that, the crying, was what saved my life. I poured the wine onto the herbs. I held the cup to my nose. The smell beneath the spice was the smell I had learned to recognise in my first week with the healer, the small, dry sharpness of monkshood. And I sat down on the low stone wall of the garden and waited for my hands to stop shaking. The girl had been threatened. That was what had made her cry. She told me the rest when I asked her, gently, with the empty cup in my lap, in the grey hour before dawn. Lady Sigrun had not yet left the fortress. Lady Sigrun did not intend to leave the fortress until something in it had changed. I went to the king at the 7th bell. I did not wait for the 8th. He was at his desk. He looked as though he had not slept either. He stood when I came in, and he saw my face, and he said, "What?" I set the empty cup on his desk. I said, "Lady Seagrin sent this to me, by a girl from the kitchens, with your name attached to it. It is monkshood and spiced wine, in roughly equal parts. I poured most of it on the rosemary. The rosemary is dying. I am not." His face did several things in succession that I will not attempt to describe. The last one was the one that frightened me, and I am the daughter of a midwife. I have seen men in pain. I have not seen the particular stillness that came over the King of the Iron Territories in his study at the 7th bell of that morning. It was the stillness of a thing deciding. I put my hand on his. I had never touched him before. I put my hand on the back of his hand, on the desk, where it had closed into a fist around nothing, and I said, "Halvar." It was the first time I had said his name. I felt the fist unclose under my palm. "You will not kill her," I said. "Not by your own hand. The council will think you did it for me, and the council will be right, and the Voska territories will use it as a reason to go to war. You will not kill her. You will summon her here. You will summon her father here. You will put the cup on the desk in front of them. You will let me speak." "Ren, you will let me speak." He nodded. He turned his hand under mine and held it for the length of one breath. And then he let go, and he sent for the beta. The summoning took half an hour. When Lady Sigrun entered the study, she was smiling. She was smiling the small, indulgent smile she had worn in the great hall, and her father was a step behind her. And they had been told only that the king wished a private word. She saw the cup on the desk. The smile did not falter. She had been raised to a face that did not falter. Her father's eyes flicked once to the cup, and once to me, and once to the king. And that was the moment I knew her father had known. I said, "Lady Sigrun, this cup was delivered to me an hour before dawn by a girl from the kitchens who told me it was sent by the king. The wine in it contained enough monkshood to kill a wolf twice my size. The girl is alive, in the infirmary, where the healer has her under watch in case she was made to taste it. She has identified you as the woman who handed her the cup." Lady Sigrun laughed. She laughed lightly, the way one laughs at a child who has confused two stories. "The herb girl," she said, "is mistaken. I sent no such cup. The girl from the kitchens is no doubt frightened and confused, having been told to lie to her." "You named the king," I said, "when you sent it. You named him so that I would drink it. You did not consider that I might know the smell of monkshood before I drank. That was your error. I want you to understand it was not the king's, and it was not Luck's. It was yours. You little." Her father caught her arm. She turned on him. He did not let go. He looked at the king over her head, and he said, in the formal voice of a man who has been calculating losses since the moment he walked in, "My daughter has been under considerable strain. I will take her home tonight. The marriage proposal is withdrawn. We will repay any debt to the territories with—" "You will repay it," the king said, "by surrendering her to the council for trial. You will leave my fortress within the hour. If she sets foot in my territories again, in any capacity, I will not require a trial." Lady Sigrun's father bowed. He took her by the arm and walked her out of the study. And her face on the way out, when it passed within 3 feet of mine, was the only time I have ever seen a noblewoman of the Voskar line look like she might weep in public. She did not weep. She held it. But she looked at me as though she were filing my face away in a place she would return to. She did not return to it. The trial was 3 weeks later. She was found guilty of the attempted poisoning of a citizen of the Iron Territories, stripped of her title and exiled to the northern reaches of her own homeland, with the king's standing order that any further movement toward our borders would be treated as an act of war. Her father, having surrendered her to the trial of his own accord, retained his lands. The Vosca alliance held. No one went to war over an herb girl, because the herb girl had asked very specifically that no one go to war over her. I read the king the verdict in his study, because he had asked me to be the one to read it. When I had finished, he sat for a long moment with his hands flat on his desk, and then he stood, and he came around the desk and he stopped 1 pace from me. He said, "I have one thing left to do." I said, "Then do it." He took my hand. He took my hand in both of his, and he turned it palm up, and he bent and kissed the inside of my wrist. Just once, just long enough that I felt the warmth of it go up the length of my arm and into the place in my chest where I had been holding my breath for 3 weeks. Then he straightened. That was the kiss. It was not on my mouth. He had not asked for my mouth yet. He was a man who did not take things he had not been given, and he had not been given my mouth. But something broke open inside me in that 1 second at the inside of my wrist that had been sealed shut since the night by the well in the herb garden. And when he straightened, I understood with a small, clean clarity that the thing I had been deciding for 3 weeks had already been decided. I said, "Halvar, Ren, ask me." He did. The claiming ceremony was held in the Great Hall at the next full moon. The council attended. The pack attended. The beater, in his 11 years of service, had never officiated a lunar ceremony before, and his hands shook slightly as he placed the silver circlet on my hair, and I will love him for the rest of my life for not pretending they did not. The king knelt in front of his pack to swear the mate vow, which had not been done by a king of the Iron Territories in 3 generations, and the pack remembered. I have lived in this fortress now for 1.5 years. I still walk past the antechamber every evening at the hour his beater brings him his 2nd cup of wine and his first stack of complaints. The door is still open a hand's breadth. I no longer stop. I no longer need to stop. I have read the journal, all of it, the new entries as well as the old, and the new entries are not undecorated anymore. The new entries are addressed to me. He leaves them open on the desk, in the way a man leaves a door open, in the way he has always left doors open for me in this fortress. The herb garden produces well. The rosemary recovered. The well still stands in the corner. I sit on the low stone wall of it some mornings before dawn, when I cannot sleep, and I think about the woman I was 1.5 years ago, who stood with her forehead pressed to her own knuckles, trying to understand what it meant to be described by a man who had not known she was listening. I have my answer now. It meant he had been listening too. Tell me, did you see it coming when she set the tray down in the corridor? Or did you, like me, think she was going to walk past the door and pretend? Stay with me a moment longer and let me know in the comments. And if her voice, if my voice, has been the kind you would like to spend another evening with, the moon icon below will keep her stories coming to you. There are more to tell. There are always more to tell. The fortress is full of doors that have been left ajar.